The champagne glass shook in Mary Baptist's hand, not because of the heavy crystal lights hanging above her, or the bunch of fancy people moving around the charity party in their pricey dresses and suits. No, it shook because of the guy standing in her way, 6 feet tall, full of quiet strength in a black suit that cost way more than what she paid for rent each month, with eyes that made those 13 years feel like nothing. "You don't remember me." His voice was smooth but strong, Korean accent making his English sound soft in a way that gave her chills. "But I remember everything about you, Miss Maya. Miss Maya." The air got knocked out of her lungs. Nobody had called her that since. "That's impossible," she whispered, her caramel skin getting warm even with the cool air on. Her brown eyes looked over his face, trying to find something she knew in those sharp cheeks, that strong jaw, those lips that smiled with a dark fun. Then her eyes caught the dragon tattoo curling up his neck, its tail hiding under his collar. Dangerous. Everything about him yelled dangerous. He stepped closer. The smell of his cologne, like sandalwood and something deeper, something fancy, filled her space. "You used to bring me honey cookies every Tuesday. You wore your hair in a bun because it was easy, but every Friday you'd let it down. I liked Fridays." Her heart pounded hard against her chest. The glass almost fell from her fingers. "He taught me that Shakespeare wrote in pentameter, that English has silent letters that make no sense, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is walk away." His eyes, super dark and not letting go, held hers. "You walked away when I was 14. I never forgot." Han Wu. The name came out of her lips like a prayer, like a curse. The boy, the quiet, intense boy who used to watch her with those 2 old eyes, who took in every word she said like he was remembering her whole self. But that boy had been 12 when she met him, small and serious in his school uniform. Nothing like this. This man who gave off power and something way more basic. You remember satisfaction came through his words. He took the champagne from her, shaky grip, put it on a nearby table without looking away. "Good. That saves time. You've grown." Dumb thing to say, obvious. But her brain was messing up, trying to match the lonely kid with the hunter in front of her. "I had to." His fingers touched her wrist, and a spark shot right to her middle. Wrong. This was wrong. "I had to become someone you could stand beside. Someone worthy of you, Hyun Woo. I was your tutor. You were a child." She stepped back, her heel catching on the marble floor. His hand shot out, steadying her with a grip that was gentle but absolutely unshakable. "I was never a child." His voice got lower, close even with the people around them. Nobody interrupted. Nobody even looked there. Way too long. He realized with slow worry that the space around them had somehow emptied. "Not in my family, not in my world, and I haven't been 12 years old for a very long time." "Miss Myra," she yanked her arm free, pulse hammering. "This is insane. I can't. I'm 25 now." He said it like it explained everything, like it erased the years, the impossibility, the absolute madness of him standing here looking at her like she was water and he'd crossed a desert. "You're 35, 10 years. Just numbers. Those numbers matter, not to me." He tilted his head, and the dragon seemed to move with him, scales catching the light. "I've built an empire, Miss Maya. I run my family's business, legitimate and otherwise. I speak 6 languages. I have portfolios in 15 countries. I can give you anything you want." He paused, and something raw flickered across his face. "Except time. I can't give you back the years I spent becoming this, but I can give you every year I have left." Her knees went weak. She locked them, forced steel into her spine, even as her body betrayed her with heat, with want she had no business feeling. "You don't know me anymore. I'm not the same person. You still drink coffee with too much cream. You still read poetry on Sunday mornings. Rumi is your favorite, but you have a guilty pleasure for Nuda. You volunteer at the literacy center in Edie every Thursday evening." His lips curved, and God help her, she felt that smile everywhere. "You think I spent 13 years forgetting you?" I slithered down her spine. "You've been watching me, searching for you," he corrected, unapologetic. "For 2 years, you disappeared from Seoul, changed your surname from Baptiste to Jean-Baptiste, moved to Paris, then London, then back here, 6 months ago. You made it difficult." He leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "I liked the challenge, but now the chase is over." She should run, should slap him, should do something other than stand here drowning in sandalwood and intensity, while her body hummed with recognition of something her mind refused to accept. This isn't people don't. Words failed her. Mere Baptiste, who made a living with words, stood speechless. "I orchestrated this meeting." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes again. "The charity gala, your invitation, the seating arrangement that put you in my line of sight the moment you walked through those doors in that gold dress that's driving me insane." His jaw tightened. "I've waited 13 years, Miss Meyer. I can't wait anymore." "You're talking about a childhood crush. I'm talking about the only woman I've ever loved." His voice cut through her protest like a blade through silk. "The only woman I will ever love. I decided that at 12. I spent 13 years proving I meant it." The room spun, or maybe she was spinning. Hard to tell, with his gravity pulling at her, with memories flooding back. A small boy who brought her drawings, who asked her questions about everything, who looked at her like she hung the moon, who cried silent tears the day she left, standing at the window of that cold mansion while his father dismissed her without ceremony. "Your family will adjust." Steel returned to his voice. "My father opposes it. My siblings think I'm obsessed. But my mother," something softer, crossed his features. "She had told me she's watched me love you for 13 years. That kind of devotion shouldn't be wasted." Mia's breath came in short gasps. Her sleek black hair, which she'd straightened to perfection tonight, suddenly felt too heavy. Her full breasts rose and fell beneath the gold silk of her dress, and she watched his gaze track the movement before snapping back to her face with visible effort. "I need air." She moved to step around him. He let her pass. Didn't grab her. Didn't cage her in, but his words followed, wrapping around her like chains. "I'll give you time, but not much. I've been patient, Miss Muir, but patience has limits, even for me." She walked toward the balcony doors on legs that barely held her, feeling his eyes on her back like a brand. The night air hit her face, cool and sharp, but it did nothing to quench the fire he'd ignited behind her through the glass. She watched his reflection. He watched him accept a phone call, watched his expression shift from the man who just confessed his soul to something colder, harder. The SEO, the heir to whatever dark empire his family controlled, and God help her, she wanted both. Wanted the boy who'd loved her with pure devotion, and the man who'd become dangerous enough to claim her. Her hands gripped the balcony railing, knuckles tight against the metal. Soul sprawled below, a sea of light stretching to the horizon. Somewhere in that city was the mansion where she taught English to a lonely boy. Somewhere in that city was the version of herself who'd walked away thinking she was doing the right thing. That me had no idea what she'd started, what she'd created. To understand how a man could wait 13 years for a woman, how he could reshape his entire existence around a ghost of memory and longing, you had to go back to where it all started, back to the rain. 13 years ago, the soul rain came down in sheets that September afternoon, turning the mansion's windows into rivers of grey. 12-year-old Lee Hyun-woo pressed his forehead against the cold glass of his father's study, watching luxury cars crawl through the downpour like black beetles. "She's late." His father's voice cut through the room, sharp, dismissive. Lee Jin-sang didn't tolerate lateness. He barely tolerated anything that disrupted his carefully controlled world of backroom deals and blood-signed contracts. Hyun-woo said nothing. He'd learned early that speaking in his father's presence was a privilege earned, not a right given. The agency promised someone qualified, American-educated. His father's fingers droomed against mahogany, each tap precise as a metronome. "Your English is abysmal, unacceptable for someone who will one day negotiate with international partners." international partners. Yuan Wu knew what that meant. The family business stretched far beyond the legitimate hotels and restaurants that bore the Lai name. It stretched into shadows, into rooms where men spoke in low voices about shipments and territories and the price of loyalty. The intercom buzzed. "Sir, the tutor has arrived. Send her in." Yuan Wu turned from the window, expecting another rigid academic like the last three tutors, middle-aged, severe, smelling of mothballs and disapproval. His father cycled through them. Quickly, none met his standards. The door opened. Time hiccuped. She swept in like warmth made flesh, shaking rain from a bright yellow umbrella that seemed obscene in the mansion's grey elegance. Water droplets scattered across the marble, catching light like tiny diamonds. Her hair, sleek, black, impossibly long, was pulled back in a practical bun, but baby curls escaped around her face, defying order. Caramel skin glowed against the simple cream blouse and black slacks. Professional, modest, but something about the way she moved, the way she smiled apologetically at the housekeeper, made him Waschess feel strange. "I'm so sorry I'm late. The subway had delays because of the flooding." Her Korean was textbook perfect, but accented musical. Then she switched to English voice, like honey over gravel. "Mr. Lee, I'm Mia Baptist. Thank you for this opportunity." She was the most beautiful thing Yuan Wu had ever seen. "You're young." His father's tone suggested this was a flaw, possibly fatal. "I'm 22, sir, but I have my 2L certification, a degree in English literature from Howard University, and 2 years of tutoring experience." She set down a leather portfolio, movements confident despite his father's ice. He specialized in working with gifted students who need challenge, not just repetition. "My son is not gifted. He's lazy." Yuan Wu's jaw tightened. Standard assessment. His father measured worth in obedience and brutality, qualities Yuan Wu showed in neither direction. But Mira turned to him then, really looked at him, and her brown eyes held something his father's never had. Curiosity, interest, like he might be more than a disappointment waiting to happen. "Hello, Yuan Wu," she smiled, and it reached her eyes. "Your father says your English needs work. What do you say?" Nobody asked him what he thought ever. His English, tangled on his tongue. I couldn't read it. Speaking is difficult. Reading's the hard part. "Actually, you've already done the heavy lifting." She crouched down, actually got on his level. Her face, even with his, and the scent of her perfume drifted over. Vanilla and something floral. Jasmine. Maybe speaking just takes practice and someone patient enough to listen. "Think we can manage that?" He nodded, not trusting his voice in any language. His father waved dismissively. "Fine. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 to 6, kitchen staff. Will provide refreshments. You'll report his progress to me weekly." He stood. Conversation over. "Failed to improve him and you're dismissed like the others." "Understood." Maya rose gracefully, collected her portfolio. But she winked at Yuan Wu. Quick, conspiratorial, before following the housekeeper out. That wink changed everything. Their first real session happened 3 days later. Yuan Wu arrived at the library 10 minutes early. Stomach nodded with something that wasn't quite nervousness, wasn't quite excitement, something new and entirely consuming. Maya was already there, spreading books across the table like she was setting a feast. She traded the professional armor for a soft lavender sweater and jeans. Her hair was still up, but looser, more relaxed. She looked younger, more accessible. And Yuan Wu's 12-year-old heart performed acrobatics in his chest. Perfect timing. She gestured to the chair beside her, not across from her like his previous tutors, but beside. "We're going to start with something fun. None of this textbook nonsense yet. Fun." The concept felt foreign in this house. Fun. She pulled out a worn paperback. "Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. You know it. I read it in Korean." He had 3 times devoured it in secret because his father called fiction a waste of time. Her smile could have powered the city. "Perfect. So you know the story?" Now we'll read it in English together. You read a paragraph, I read a paragraph. When you hit a word you don't know, we stop and figure it out. Sound good? It sounded better than good. It sounded like someone had actually considered what he might enjoy. They spent 2 hours lost in Hogwarts. She didn't correct his pronunciation harshly, just repeated words naturally in her responses until he picked up the proper sounds. She laughed at the funny parts, really laughed, head thrown back, hand pressed to her stomach, and made him laugh too when he stumbled over Heron. She told him a story about mispronouncing it herself until the movies came out. Everyone struggles with something, she said, passing him a cookie from the tin she'd brought. Honey cookies, homemade, still warm. The trick is not letting the struggle stop you. You try, you fail, you try again. That's how we grow. He bit into the cookie, buttery, sweet, perfect, and felt something crack open in his chest. Some door he hadn't known was sealed. Miss Meyer, his English was careful, halting. Why you kind? Her expression softened. She reached over, tucked one of those rebellious curls behind her ear. Why wouldn't I be kind, Hyun-woo? You deserve kindness. No one had ever said that to him before. The weeks blurred into months. Tuesday and Thursday became Hyun-woo's religion. The hours he lived for in a life otherwise painted in shades of duty and disappointment. Maya brought him books, not just English primers, but stories, adventure novels, and poetry collections, and biographies of people who'd changed the world. She brought music, playing English songs, and dissecting lyrics like they were puzzles to solve together. She brought warmth into the cold mansion, laughter into silence, possibility into the predetermined path his father had laid out. Tell me something true, she said one Thursday in November. Rain pattering against the windows again. They'd finished early, both restless. She sat cross-legged on the floor, and he joined her, abandoning the formal table arrangement. True. He tested the English word, rolled it around his mouth. Something real about you. Something you don't tell other people. She leaned back on her hands, casual and open. I'll go first. I'm scared of birds. I'm completely terrified. A pigeon landed on my head in Paris when I was 7, and I've never recovered. He laughed. She made him laugh, so easily now, then sobered. I'm scared of becoming my father. The confession escaped before he could cage it. He expected her to dismiss it, to offer empty reassurances like the hired help always did when they accidentally glimpsed the cracks in the Lee family facade. Instead, she met his eyes seriously. Then, Don, you get to choose who you become, Hyun-woo. It won't be easy. Family pressure never is. But you're not destined to be anyone except who you decide to be. What if I decide to be someone? He switched to Korean, the English failing him. Someone better than this place, this life. Then you will be simple, certain, like she could see. Futures he couldn't even imagine. He wanted to tell her then, wanted to say that she'd already made him better. That the hours with her were the only time. He felt like something other than a disappointment or a future weapon his father was sharpening. But 12-year-olds don't have the words for that kind of devotion. So, he just said, "Thank you, Miss Meyer." For what? For seeing me. Her eyes glistened just slightly. She reached over, squeezed his hand once. I see you, Hyun-woo, and what I see is extraordinary. That touch burned itself into his DNA. Friday became his favorite day, just like he told her 13 years later in that ballroom. She wore her hair down on Fridays. Said it was her personal rule, that she spent all week being professional and practical, but Fridays were for small rebellions. He loved watching her move through the library with that curtain of black silk swaying down her back. He loved how she'd absently twist a strand around her finger when she was thinking. He loved how the baby curls at her temples would spring free, no matter how much he tried to tame them. You're staring, she teased one Friday, catching him watching as she shelved a book. He fluttered his face. Sorry, don't be sorry. I'm just curious what's so fascinating about watching someone put books away. She turned hip-cocked against the shelf, genuinely interested in his answer. You look happy, he said in English. The words coming easier now after months of practice. Most people here look tired, angry. You look like you want to be here. Her smile went soft. I do want to be here. These hours with you, they're the best part of my week. Hyun-woo. His heart stopped. Started again. Beat a rhythm that spelled out her name. He was 12 years old, and he knew with the certainty that later he'd apply to business deals and strategic moves, that she was it, the only woman who would ever matter, the only person who'd ever looked at him and seen something worth nurturing, instead of something to use or break. He just had to become worthy of her. But childhood certainties crumbled easily under the weight of reality. It happened on a Tuesday in March. He was 14 now, taller, voice cracking at unfortunate moments, desperately trying to grow into someone she might see as more than a student. She still came twice a week, still brought cookies and books, and that sunshine presence that made the mansion bearable. They were reading Nuda. She'd started introducing him to poetry, said it would help with expression and metaphor. Her voice wrapped around the Spanish-influenced English, sensual and rich. I want to do with you what spring does with the cherry trees, she'll read. And 14-year-old Hyun-woo felt those words in his bones. The library door slammed open. His father stood there, face carved from granite. Miss Baptiste, word. Now Mia's expression shifted. Still professional but wary, she marked their page, set the book down carefully. Of course, Mr. Lee Hyun-woo moved to follow. Stay. His father's command was absolute. The door closed behind them. Hyun-woo pressed his ear to the wood, shame burning through him even as he strained to hear. Services are no longer required. His father's voice muffled but clear enough. Sir, if this is about Hyun-woo's progress, his English has improved dramatically. This is about inappropriate attachment. My son is distracted, unfocused. You've made him soft. Silence. Dan Mia's voice harder than he'd ever heard it. With respect, Mr. Lee, your son isn't soft. He's brilliant and kind and capable of extraordinary things. If you are dismissed. Effective immediately. Your payment will be processed. Do not contact this family again. Yanhua's world tilted. He burst through the door. No, father, please go to your room. She's the only. His father's hand cracked across his face, not hard enough to truly injure, but sharp enough to silence. You will learn that attachments are weaknesses, especially to people beneath our station. Go to your room. Hyunwoo's cheeks stung, but nothing compared to the pain. When he looked at me, tears tracked down her beautiful face. She was crying for him, and that broke something fundamental. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then to his father, voice steady despite the tears. He deserves better than this. What he deserves is none of your concern. She looked at Hyun-woo one last time, mouthed something that looked like, be extraordinary. Then she was gone. He ran to his bedroom window, the same window where he'd watched for her arrival that first day. Watched her emerge from the mansion, yellow umbrella opening against the spring rain that had started falling. Watched her pause, looked back at his window like she knew he'd be there. She pressed her hand to her heart, then to her lips, then held that palm up to him across the distance. Promise, or a goodbye. Maybe both. Hyun-woo pressed his hand to the glass, fingers spowled against the cold barrier between them. And as her taxi pulled away, taking her out of his life, he made a promise of his own. I'll find you again. I'll become someone you can't dismiss, someone you can't walk away from, someone worthy of that goodbye kiss you just sent. Wait for me, Miss Maya. I'm coming. The boy at the window was 14 years old. The man he'd become would move heaven and earth to keep that promise. The boy died the night she left. Not literally, though. Some nights, in the years that followed, Hyun-woo wished for that kind of simple ending. No, the death was slower, more deliberate. He killed the soft parts of himself methodically, like a surgeon excising disease, buried the child who believed kindness mattered. That love could exist in a world built on power and blood, but he kept one thing alive, one ember that refused. to extinguish no matter how much darkness he piled on top of it. At age 15, the morning after Mira left, Hyunwoo walked into his father's office without knocking. In Lee Jin-sang's world, that alone was a punishable offense. But his father looked up, studied his son's face, and gestured calmly to the chair opposite him. "I want in," Hyunwoo said in flat, careful Korean. He had practiced until every trace of warmth was gone. "The real business, not the version you show at dinner parties. I want everything." His father leaned back, fingers steepled. Satisfaction, not joy, curved his lips. "Everything. The rooms without windows, the deals signed in blood instead of ink. The consequences. This world will harden you," Jin-sang said quietly. "It will make you capable of things your tutor would find monstrous." "Good," Hyunwoo thought. "I need to be out loud," he said. "I understand." "Why now?" "Because you were right," Hyunwoo lied, the words burning his tongue. "Attachments are weaknesses. I'm ready to be strong." His father smiled. "Genuine and terrible. Welcome to the family business." Hyunwoo transformed with ruthless focus. He mastered the family's legitimate empire first. Hotels, restaurants, real estate, devouring financials and strategy until his tutors grew uneasy. At 16, he attended his first real negotiation. A desperate developer, a quiet threat disguised as conversation. His father mentioned the man's daughter's school schedule as casually as the weather. Afterward, Jin-sang asked, "What did you learn?" "Hell," Hyunwoo said. "But he'll resent it. Better to bind him through obligation than fear." "Soft," his father murmured. "Strategic." For the first time, something like concern flickered in Jansen's eyes. Hyunwoo didn't notice. He was already building something vast enough that no one, family, society, or Mira herself, could dismiss him as the boy she'd left behind. Age 17, languages became weapons. English polished to perfection. French, because she once spoke of Paris at sunset. Mandarin, Japanese, Spanish, because power spoke many tongues and so had she. His bedroom turned into a fortress of books and glowing screens. He slept when his body collapsed. His staff whispered he'd gone mad. At night, he took out the photograph, the only one he had. Maya laughing, unguarded, alive. "I'm getting better," he whispered. "Wait for me." The photograph never answered. Age 18 to 19, the real meetings followed. Private rooms, unlisted shipments, money that vanished when examined too closely. Hyunwoo learned silence, micro-expressions, the art of violence without bloodshed. "You have a gift," his uncle said one night. "Ruthlessness with vision." "I see 5 moves ahead," Hyunwoo replied. The business disgusted him. The casual cruelty, the way lives became leverage. But he excelled, and he needed to. The only way to build something cleaner was to become indispensable first. Age 20, his mother found him in the garden one evening. "You're killing yourself," she said softly. "You've become everything your father wanted. This is what I need to be." "I remember a boy who laughed," she said, "who loved poetry, who was happy. That boy was weak. That boy was human." She studied him, then sighed. "You're still thinking about her." He didn't deny it. "Love doesn't survive in this world," she warned. "Your father sent her away because he was afraid you'd choose her over duty. He was right. He'll never accept her. The age difference, and her need is acceptance." Hyunwoo said, "I just need his empire." She understood then. Mothers always did. Age 21 to 22. The tattoo came on a rain-soaked night in Idwin after a deal worth 30 million. "A dragon," Hyunwoo told the artist. "From the collarbone to the neck. This will hurt Gur." The needle burned truth into his skin. When it was done, he barely recognized himself. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, dragon rising where no collar could hide it. A declaration. The boy who cried at the window was gone. What remained was someone Mira might not recognize, but who still loved her with the same terrible devotion. Age 23. The coup was almost gentle. His father's mistakes had accumulated quietly. Hyun-woo spent months forging alliances, offering better returns, safer futures. At a formal family dinner, he stood. "We need to discuss leadership transition." Folders circulated. Projections spoke. Silence followed. "Sit down," Hyun-woo said when his father rose. "The votes are in." Lee Jin-sung looked around the table and understood. He planned this for 3 years. The vote was a formality. At 23, Hyun-woo became CEO. That night, alone in his father's former office, he unfolded the old photograph. "I did it," he whispered. "I have the power now." He searched everywhere, databases, legal and illegal alike. Maya Baptiste had vanished, aged 23 to 25. The search, finding someone who didn't want to be found, required patience, resources, and the willingness to cross lines. Hyun-woo had all three. First, he tried the obvious routes. Immigration records showed she'd left Korea 2 weeks after being dismissed. Destination: Paris. He sent people there, investigators, not thugs, with her photograph and generous bribes for information. She'd lived in the 5th arrondissement for 18 months, taught English at a language school, then disappeared again. Next trail led to London teaching position at an international school. 2 years there before she moved again. She was running, but from what? Him, his family, or just the memories of a job that had ended badly? Each dead end felt like losing her. Again, but Hyun-woo had learned obsessive persistence from the best. He expanded the search, hired private investigators across 3 continents, monitored teaching job postings, tracked professional certifications, and licensing renewals. "Sir, perhaps it's time to consider that she doesn't want to be found," his assistant suggested carefully. After the 18th month, Hyun-woo had looked up from his desk, and something in his expression made the man step back. "Then, I'll find her anyway. Keep looking." His days became a careful balance, running the family business, legitimizing operations where he could, minimizing damage where he couldn't, networking with Seoul's elite, building alliances that had nothing to do with his father's old methods, making the Lie name synonymous with power, yes, but also with innovation and vision. In every spare moment, every quiet hour, he searched. She changed her surname, Baptiste, to Jean Baptiste. Smart made searching government databases harder, but not impossible. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. His lead investigator called, voice tight with relief. "Found her, sir. She's back in Seoul." Hyun-woo's heart stopped. "When?" 6 months ago. She's working as an educational consultant for international schools. Lives in Hanam-dong. I'm sending you the full report. 6 months. She'd been in the same city for 6 months, while he'd been searching the world. He pulled up her address, memorized it, drove past her apartment building that night like a stalker, hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Wanted to march up there, demand answers, beg her to remember him. But no, he'd waited this long. He could wait a little longer. Wait until he could engineer a meeting that didn't reek of desperation. Wait until he could approach her, not as the boy she'd pitied, but as the man he'd become. Wait until the moment was perfect. The gala planning the charity event took 3 months to orchestrate. He volunteered to co-chair the committee, unusual for someone of his position, but his mother's pet cause was literacy, so it made sense he'd be involved. He arranged the guest list personally, made sure Jean Baptiste received an invitation. She consulted for several of the international schools represented. Of course, she'd be invited. Made sure she'd be seated where he could watch her arrive. Made sure he looked perfect that night. Made sure every detail was flawless. And when she walked through those doors in gold silk that clung to curves, he'd been too young to appreciate 13 years ago, when her hair fell in sleek perfection down her back, when her brown eyes scanned the room with cautious interest. Hyun-woo felt 13 years of waiting condense into a single moment of absolute certainty. Now he'd become everything he needed to be. Built an empire. Transformed himself from the boy at the window into a man who could stand beside her without shame. All that remained was convincing her that the 10 years between them didn't matter, that the boy she'd pitied had become the man she'd love, that 13 years of devotion meant something. You watched her take a champagne flute from a passing waiter, watched her smile politely at someone who approached her, watched her exist in the same space as him for the first time in 13 years, and felt the dragon on his neck seemed to tighten, like even the ink understood this moment's significance. Then he moved, crossed the ballroom with predatory grace, watching her register his approach in periphery, watching her turn and seeing the exact moment she looked at him and saw a stranger instead of the boy she'd known. Parfait. Let her see the stranger first. Let her understand how much it changed. Then he'd reintroduce himself and watch her world tilt the way his head tilted when she'd first walked into his father's study, carrying sunshine and possibility. "You don't remember me?" He let himself say it. Let the words hang between them like a challenge. Let the hunt begin. The city lights of Seoul had never looked more beautiful than they did from Mia's apartment window at 3 o'clock in the morning, when sleep refused to come and her mind kept replaying a voice that said "Miss Mirror," like it was a prayer and a possession all at once. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching traffic crawl through Hanamdong like luminous beetles. Her reflection stared back, hair wrapped in a silk scarf, bare face, oversized Howard University t-shirt that had survived a decade of moves across continents. She looked tired, felt exhausted, but her heart wouldn't stop racing. "I've waited 13 years. Who did that? Who loved someone with that kind of singular, devastating focus?" She'd been his tutor. She taught him English and brought him cookies, and tried to give a lonely child some warmth in a house that felt like a mausoleum. That was all. That was supposed to be all, except the way he'd looked at her tonight suggested it had been everything. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She ignored it. Probably another work email about the curriculum review due Monday, but it buzzed again and again. She picked it up, and her breath caught. Unknown number, but the message was anything but unknown. "You used to drink chamomile tea before bed. Helped you sleep after long days. Does it still work? LHW. Her hands trembled. "How did he? When did he?" Another message arrived before she could process the first. "I know you're awake. I can see your light from here." Her slithered down her spine. She looked out the window, scanning the buildings across the street, the parked cars lining the road, searching for their black sedan, too expensive for this neighborhood, parked 3 buildings down, and in the driver's seat, barely visible, but unmistakable, a silhouette watching her window. She should be terrified. Should call the police, report a stalker, do something rational and self-preserving. Instead, she texted back, "This is crazy." His response came immediately. "Probably. Does that change anything? You can't just. People don't do this. This isn't how the world works. I've never been particularly interested in how the world works, only in making it work for me." She laughed, short, sharp, slightly hysterical. God. Even his texts carried that absolute confidence, that underlying threat of competence that was somehow more dangerous than actual violence. "Go home, Hyunwoo. I am home. Anywhere you are is home. I decided that at 12. Haven't changed my mind." Her chest tightened. She set the phone down, paced her small living room, 3 steps to the bookshelf, 3 steps back to the window. Her space was modest compared to the mansion where they'd met, but it was hers. Books everywhere, plants hanging in macro holders she'd made herself, throw pillows in vibrant African prints that reminded her of her grandmother's house in Louisiana. Warm, lived in safe until tonight, when safety became negotiable. The phone buzzed again. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to court you. There's a difference. Court me by stalking me, by showing you I'm serious, that I see you, that I've always seen you." She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "You need to slow down. This is too much, too fast. I've spent 13 years going slowly. I'm done with slow. I'm not a prize you won by waiting long enough." Long pause. "Then you're right. You're not a prize, you're the point. The only point. And I'm not asking you to love me back immediately. I'm just asking you not to run. Not yet. Give me a chance to show you who I've become." Maya sank onto her couch, phone clutched in both hands. The rational part of her brain screamed warnings. This was obsession, not love. This was a powerful man used to getting what he wanted, applying that same ruthless determination to her. But another part, smaller, more dangerous, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was what devotion looked like when it refused to die, when it survived rejection and distance and time itself. 1 week, she typed. You get 1 week to prove this isn't just some fixation from your childhood. Then I decide, deal. Starting now. Starting tomorrow. Now you go home and sleep. Only if you promise to drink the tea, you need rest. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Despite everything, she smiled. Good night, Hyunwoo. Good night, Miss Miri. The black sedan pulled away from the curb, taillights fading into Seoul's nocturnal traffic, and Maya sat in her quiet apartment, wondering what kind of storm she just agreed to walk into. He wasn't kidding about intense. The flowers arrived at 7 a.m., white orchids, dozens of them, arranged in a crystal vase that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The cart was simple. Day 1, LHW. By 8 a.m., her doorbell rang. A crier, with a package. Inside, a first edition of Pablo Neruda's 20 Love Poems and a Song of Despair. English translation, the same edition she'd read from during their lessons. Her hands shook as she opened to a marked page. I love you, without knowing how or when or from where. I love you straightforwardly, without complexities or pride. So I love you because I know no other way. In the margin in handwriting that had matured but was still recognizably his. This is how. This is when. This is where. Age 14. He'd written that 7 years ago. Carried this book for 7 years, waiting. Her phone rang. Unknown number. But she knew. Did you sleep? His voice was rough, intimate, like he'd just woken up himself. She cradled the phone between shoulder and ear, running her fingers over the aged paper. The flowers are beautiful. The book is Hyunwoo. This is too much. It's not nearly enough. Have breakfast with me. I can't. I have a meeting at 9:30. I know. Educational consultant review for Seoul International Academy. I rescheduled it to 11. You have time? She froze. How do you? Did you? I'm on the board. Made some calls. They understand you need the morning free. Pause. I'm outside. Coffee's getting cold. She went to the window. Sure enough, there he was, leaning against a different car. This one, a sleek silver thing that probably cost more than her entire yearly salary. He wore dark jeans and a black sweater, casual but devastatingly attractive. The dragon on his neck was visible, scales catching morning light. He looked up, caught her watching, smiled. That smile should be illegal. This is insane, she said into the phone. You've already said that, but you're getting dressed anyway. I can tell. Arrogant, observant. 5 minutes, Miss Miri, or I'm coming up. She hung up, stared at her reflection in the hallway mirror. Caramel skin bare of makeup, hair still wrapped, wearing yesterday's t-shirt and sleep shorts. She looked like disaster, felt like disaster. But she went to her bedroom anyway, pulled out jeans and a cream sweater, twisted her hair into a quick bun. Baby curls escaped immediately. They always did. She gave up, let them frame her face, applied minimal makeup because she refused to look like she was trying too hard. Even though she was. God, she absolutely was. The cafe he took her to was tucked in Buckshin. All traditional Hanok architecture, modernized with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist design. Private, quiet, the kind of place where people who valued discretion met. He'd reserved the entire second floor. Subtle, she said, settling into a chair by the window. The view overlooked traditional tiled roofs and narrow alleyways. Seoul's old, Seoul preserved amid the modern rush. I don't believe in subtle, not when it comes to you. He poured her coffee, added cream without asking, just the amount she liked. How's the chamomile supply? I had some last night. It helped. She wrapped her hands round the cup, needing something to hold. Talk to me, Han-woo. Help me understand. You were 12. I was your teacher. This, she gestured between them, shouldn't exist, but it does. Childhood crushes fade. That's what they do. They're not supposed to survive into whatever this is. He leaned back, studied her with those intense eyes that had always seemed too old for his face. What if it wasn't a crush? What if it was recognition? Recognition? You were the first person who ever saw me as something other than a disappointment or a weapon in training. He looked at me and saw potential, possibility, someone worth investing in. His fingers drummed once against the table, the only sign of nervousness. That kind of seeing changes you permanently. I saw a lonely child who needed kindness. That night wasn't pity. Don't reduce what we had to pity. Steel entered his voice. He challenged me, pushed me, believed I could be better than my circumstances. And you were right. Look what I became. She had looked last night. She'd gone home and searched him online, found articles about the youngest CEO in his family's history, profiles in business magazines that called him innovative and ruthless in equal measure, photographs of him at charity events and business conferences, always impeccably dressed, always with that carefully controlled expression, and one article buried deep that mentioned his family's connections to Seoul's underground economy. Nothing explicit, nothing provable, just implications that made her stomach knot. What exactly did you become? She asked quietly. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Someone capable of protecting what's mine. I'm not yours. Not yet. He smiled, but there was nothing soft about it. But you will be. Because everything I built, every move I made, every deal I closed, it was all to become someone you couldn't dismiss. Someone worthy of standing beside you. That's not love, Hyun-woo. That's obsession. Maybe, but obsession kept me focused when everything else tried to break me. Obsession made me better, stronger. And now I'm here, and you're here, and we both know there's something between us, whether you want to admit it or not. Heat crept up her neck because he wasn't wrong. The attraction was undeniable. The way her body responded to his proximity, the way her pulse kicked whenever he said her name in that particular tone. Chemistry didn't care about age gaps or appropriateness, or the logical reasons this was a terrible idea. 1 week, she reminded him. You promised me a week to decide, and I'll give you 7 days. But I'm going to use every single one of them to convince you that 10 years doesn't matter. That what we have is worth the complications. He reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. I'm going to court you the way you deserve, the way I couldn't when I was 14 and powerless. Let me show you what devotion looks like when it has resources behind it. That sounds vaguely threatening. It's a promise. There's a difference. Day 2 brought a private cooking class. He discovered she loved Italian food. So, he'd flown in a chef from Rome. He actually flown someone in to teach them how to make fresh pasta in the kitchen of one of his hotels. Maya tried to be annoyed by the extravagance, failed miserably when Han-woo got flour on his expensive shirt and swore in Korean, making the chef laugh. You're terrible at this, she teased, watching him struggle with the pasta dough. I'm excellent at many things. Cooking isn't one of them. He shot her a look. But I'm excellent at trying. That counts for something. They rolled dough-shaped ravioli, made sauce from scratch, and somewhere between the flour fights and the wine and the way he listened, really listened when she talked about her work, her dreams for educational reform, her frustration with systems that failed kids who needed help most, Maya felt something. Schiff, this wasn't the CEO. It wasn't the dangerous man with underworld connections and a dragon tattoo. This was someone who cared what she thought, who remembered that she liked Basil more than who asked questions about her life with genuine interest. This was the boy she'd known, grown up, but not gone. Tell me about Paris, he said over dinner. Pasta they'd made themselves, candles flickering between them, Seoul spread out beyond the windows like a carpet of stars. So she'd told him about their tiny apartment in the 5th, about teaching English to executives and falling in love with bookstores along the sign, about feeling lost and found, simultaneously about rebuilding herself after leaving Korea. "Why did you come back?" he asked. Sol kept calling. "I left a piece of myself here." I think she swirled wine in her glass, watching red liquid catch light. Plus, the job offer was incredible. TED consultant for 3 international schools. I couldn't turn it down. "Fate," he said simply. "Coincidence? No such thing. Not when it comes to us." Day 3 was quieter. He took her to a pottery studio not fancy, just a small place run by an elderly woman who'd been throwing clay for 60 years. They made bowls together, hands messy with clay and water, and Hyun-woo was surprisingly good at it. "Hidden talent?" Maya asked, watching his long fingers. "Shape porcelain with sure movements. My mother taught me when I was young." Before he trailed off, before she learned that showing me affection was dangerous in my father's house, there it was, the shadow that lingered beneath his polished surface. "Tell me about your family," she said softly, his hands stilled on the clay. "What do you want to know? Why your father dismissed me?" "Really? It wasn't just about distraction, was it?" "No." He resumed working, but tension threaded through his shoulders. "It was about control. He saw how I looked at you, saw that you made me soft." His word, not mine. In his world, softness is death, attachment is weakness, love is a liability. And you became what he wanted anyway. I became something far more dangerous than he ever imagined. Yanhwa's voice was quiet, lethal. I became someone who could take everything from him. And then I did. She shivered, despite the studio's warmth. "Do you regret it?" "No. I regret that I had to become ruthless to survive. But I don't regret the outcome." He finally looked at her and his eyes were so earnest it hurt. "Everything I did to get back to you. That's the truth, Miss Miri. Every single choice pointed toward this moment." "That's too much responsibility," she whispered. "What if I'm not? What if I can't be what you need me to be?" "You already are. You're exactly yourself. That's all I've ever wanted." Day 4 broke her heart and healed it simultaneously. He took her to the mansion, his family home, where she taught him, where she'd been dismissed, where everything had started and ended 13 years ago. Why here? She stood in the driveway, staring at the imposing structure that hadn't changed. Same greystone, same cold elegance, same windows that held secrets. "Because you need to see that I'm not that powerless boy anymore. This house doesn't own me. My father doesn't own me." He took her hand. First time he'd really touched her, and her skin sang with it. "Come on." The interior was different, warmer. He'd renovated since taking over, added light, color, life. The library where they'd studied was still there, but the furniture was new, comfortable, inviting. "I kept one thing exactly the same." He led her to the window seat. "This spot where you used to sit on Fridays with your hair down, reading to me." She sat, and it was like stepping through time. The light felt the same. The view of the garden hadn't changed. Even the air felt familiar. Hyun-woo pulled a box from beneath the seat, opened it. Inside, every drawing he'd ever made her, every essay he'd written. The report card where his English grade had jumped from C to A, photographs of them together. She hadn't known he'd taken them. Her laughing, teaching, existing in moments she'd forgotten, but he'd preserved. And at the bottom, a child's handwriting on lined paper. "When I grow up, I'm going to marry Miss Mia. She's the most beautiful, smartest, kindest person in the world. I'll become someone good enough for her. Promise." Lee Hyun-woo, age 12. Tears spilled before she could stop them. "He kept this. I kept everything." He knelt beside the window seat. I leveled with her. This wasn't a phase. Wasn't childish infatuation. This was me recognizing my person and spending every day since trying to become worthy of her. Han-woo. His name broke on her lips. "You don't have to say anything yet. Just let me finish the week. Let me show you that what I feel isn't going away, but it's real." He reached up, wiped her tears with his thumb. "You're crying. I've made you cry. Good tears. She caught his hand, held it against her cheek. Overwhelming tears. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to do anything. Just be here. That's enough. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. Because sitting in that window seat, holding his hand, surrounded by evidence of 13 years of devotion, Maya felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. Day 5 brought his family. She'd known it was coming. He'd warned her the night before, but nothing prepared her for walking into a private dining room at one of Seoul's most exclusive restaurants and facing the collective judgment of the Lee family. His father, Lee Jae-sang, looked at her like she was something scraped off his shoe. His uncle and aunt wore polite masks that didn't hide their disapproval. His siblings, an older brother and younger sister, ranged from curious to hostile, but his mother, Lian Hua, met her eyes and smiled. Miss Baptiste, it's wonderful to see you again after so many years. Her English was perfect, warm. Please sit. I've been looking forward to this conversation. The meal was excruciating. Jae-sang made pointed comments about appropriate relationships, about age differences, about the importance of family reputation. His uncle questioned her background, her finances, her intentions with surgical precision. Yan-woo endured it with cold patience until his father said, "This woman was hired help, an employee. The fact that you're entertaining this fixation shows poor judgment." Careful. Father Hyunwa's voice could have frozen fire. "You're speaking about the woman I intend to marry. I suggest you adjust your tone." Silence crashed over the table. "Marry?" His brother laughed incredulously. "You can't be serious. The scandal." "Alone, I don't care about scandal." Hyun-woo cut him off. "I care about her, and I've earned the right to make my own decisions. Or have you forgotten who runs this family now?" Hyun-woo. His mother spoke quietly, but Ivarian stopped. "I speak with Miss Baptiste privately." They left the table, walked out onto the restaurant's terrace. Seoul hummed below them, oblivious to the drama playing out above. "He's loved you for 13 years, Yeonhwa said without preamble. "I watched it. Watched him transform himself, drive himself relentlessly, become something far harder than any child should become. All for you. I never asked. Of course you didn't. Love doesn't require permission." She turned to me, and her eyes were kind but sharp. "The question isn't whether he loves you. That's obvious. The question is whether you can love him back, whether you can accept what he's become, the good and the dangerous, and still choose him." "I don't know," Mira admitted. "The age difference, his world, the complications are excuses. Real obstacles, yes, but also excuses." Yanhua smiled sadly. "I'm married for duty. Spent 30 years in a cold marriage, because that's what was expected. I won't let my son make the same mistake. If you love him, fight for it. If you don't, let him go cleanly. But don't waste his devotion on maybe." Back inside, Yeonwoo was arguing with his father. Low, intense, the kind of argument that could shatter families. Yeon-Of-mir's voice cut through it. Every head turned. "Stop." She walked to Yeonwoo, stood beside him, felt his shock, his hope. "I appreciate your concerns," she said to Jae-sang, "but you don't get a vote. This is between me and your son, and I'm still deciding. But I'm deciding freely without pressure from anyone in this room. Understood?" Jae-sang's face went purple, but Yeon-woo's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once, and in that moment, Mia understood. This wasn't about his family's approval. It was about her choosing freely and completely to walk into his complicated world. The question was, could she? Day 6 arrived with a crisis. Hyun-woo called at midnight, voice tight with controlled fury. "I need you to stay inside tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. I'm sending security." "What? Why?" "Business complication. Someone's making moves. It's not safe." Hyun-woo, what kind of business? "The kind I wish you never had to see." He exhaled roughly. "But you need to know. You need to understand what being with me means. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Just promise me you'll stay safe." She promised. Next morning, Two men in black suits appeared outside a building, professional, polite, absolutely terrifying in their competence. Hyun-woo arrived at noon, looking exhausted. The dragon on his neck seemed darker somehow, more menacing in daylight that caught the shadows under his eyes. "Tell me," she said simply. So he did. Told her about the family business, the legitimate parts, and the parts that operated in gray areas. Told her about rivals, about territories, about a situation that had escalated overnight because someone thought attacking his interests would weaken him. "I handled it," he said quietly. "But it required methods I'm not proud of. Threats, leverage, the kind of things my father taught me." He met her eyes. "You need to know what you're getting into. I'm not just a CEO. I'm someone who can be dangerous when necessary. And if you're with me, you become a target. Is that why you have security on me now? Yes, I can protect you. Will protect you with everything I have. But I can't pretend that danger doesn't exist." She absorbed this, processed the reality behind the expensive suits and smooth confidence. He was exactly what he'd said. Someone who'd become ruthless to survive, to succeed, to get back to her. "If I walk away," she asked slowly, "would you let me go?" Pain flickered across his face. "Yes, I'd hate it. It would destroy me, but I'd let you go. You're not a prisoner, Ms. Maya. You never could be. And if I stay, if I choose this, choose you, what happens? Everything. You get everything." He moved closer, and she smelled sandalwood and exhaustion. "My protection, my devotion, every resource. I have my entire world restructured around keeping you safe and happy. But also complications, judgment, danger when business goes wrong. A life that's not simple or easy. Sounds terrifying. It is. Sounds lonely, too. Without you, unbearably so." She stepped into his space, watched his breath catch, reached up, traced the dragon on his neck with one finger, felt him shudder. "One more day," she whispered. "Yeah, one more day." Hyun-woo. His hand came up, covered hers against his neck. "I'll make it count." And now, if you're watching this and you're new to this channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. Trust me, this story is about to get even more intense. Drop a comment and tell me what country you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I love seeing where you all are in the world. Are you Team Hyun-woo or Team This Is Too Much? Let me know. Day 7, the final day. Hyun-woo had been silent since midnight. No texts, no calls, nothing. The security team remained, but they wouldn't tell her anything. At sunset, one of them handed her an envelope. Inside, an address in Namson and a note in his handwriting. "If you come decided. Whatever you choose, I'll accept, but I need to know. LHW. She dressed carefully. The gold dress from the gala, her hair down and flowing, makeup perfect. If she was going to end this, she'd end it looking like herself. If she was going to begin it, well, the address led to Namson Tower's observation deck. He'd reserved it, of course. He had, and Seoul spread out below in a sea of lights. His city that had brought them together and torn them apart and brought them back again. Hyun-woo stood at the railing, suit perfect, dragon visible, every inch the powerful man he'd become. "Hi," she said softly. He had turned and his expression was raw, vulnerable, the boy and the man combined. "Hi, Miss Maya. You've been quiet today. I gave you space to think, to decide without my influence." He didn't move toward her. "Have you decided?" She walked to him slowly, heart hammering, every step a choice. Stopped close enough to feel his heat, to see the way his jaw tightened with restraint. "I have questions first. Anything. Can you be gentle with me? With our life? Or did you kill that part of yourself? For you," his voice was raw, "for you, I can be anything. The ruthless parts exist to protect what matters. You matter most. You've always mattered most. Can you accept that I'm older? That people will judge? I stopped caring what people thought when I was 14 and watching you leave." He lifted his hand, hesitated. "May I?" She nodded. His fingers traced her jaw feather light. Reverend, you're 35. I'm 25. 10 years. In 20 years, you'll be 55 and I'll be 45. In 40 years, you'll be 75 and I'll be 65. The gap doesn't change, but it matters less with time, and I have nothing but time to give you. Your family, my mother supports us. The others will adjust, or they won't. Either way, you're my choice, not them. She closed her eyes, felt his thumb brush across her cheekbone. This is insane. You keep saying that because it keeps being true. Does that change what you feel? And there it was, the real question. Because beneath the complications and the age difference and the danger and the judgment, there was something undeniable. Something that had started 13 years ago, when he was a lonely boy and she was a young woman trying to make a difference. Something that had survived time and distance and transformation. Recognition, he called it that. Recognition of person, of purpose, of home. I'm terrified, she whispered. Me too. I'm going to make mistakes, probably push you away when things get hard. I'll pull you back gently, always gently with you. I can't promise I'll love you the way you love me. Not right away. I can wait. I'm good at waiting. His other hand came up, cradling her face like she was something precious. I've been waiting 13 years. A little longer won't break me. She opened her eyes, met his, saw 13 years of devotion. Looking back, saw the boy who'd written her name in a child's handwriting and promised to become worthy. Saw the man who'd kept that promise, against all odds. Saw her future if she was brave enough to claim it. Ask me, she said. Ask me properly. His breath caught. Then he smiled. Real, unguarded, beautiful. Dropped to one knee right there on Namsen Tower, soul glittering beneath them like a blessing. Mia Jean Baptiste, he said in perfect English, accent barely noticeable now. Will you? Let me love you. Not as your student, not as the boy you once knew, but as the man I've become. Will you give this a real chance? She should say no. She'd be reasonable, rational, safe. Instead, she pulled him to his feet, threaded her fingers through his hair, brought his face down to hers. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, you impossible, devoted, terrifying man. Yes. He kissed her like he'd been dying for it. 13 years of waiting condensed into one perfect moment. His mouth on hers, his hands in her hair, her body pressed against his like they were trying to occupy the same space, desperate and gentle, simultaneously, taking everything and offering more. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, he said in Korean, then English, then French and Spanish, and every language he'd learned, as if one tongue wasn't enough to express it. I know, she said, smiling through tears. You've been showing me for 13 years. I'm finally ready to see it. 3 months later, Mira woke up in Hyun-woo's bed for the first time. Not the first time she'd stayed over. They'd been navigating the delicate dance of physical intimacy with the patience he'd promised, letting her set every boundary, respecting every hesitation. But this was the first morning she woke up in his space in the penthouse, overlooking the Han River, wrapped in sheets that smelled like sandalwood in him. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, turning soul gold. She stretched, muscles pleasantly sore from the night before. The night they'd finally stopped holding back, stopped being careful, stopped pretending that the chemistry between them wasn't combustible. Her body still hummed with the memory of his hands, his mouth, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer against her skin. Coffee. She turned. Hyun-woo stood in the doorway, wearing nothing but black silk pajama bottoms that hung low on his hips, the dragon on his neck, seeming to shift with the play of morning light across his skin. He held 2 mugs, looking rumpled and perfect, and hers. Mine, she thought, and the possessiveness should have scared her. Instead, it felt right. Coffee sounds. Perfect. She sat up, let the sheet pull at her waist, watched his eyes darken as they traced her bare shoulders, the swell of her breasts. You're torturing me, he said roughly, crossing to the bed. Set the mugs on the nightstand with careful precision before climbing back in beside her, pulling her against his chest. And I love it, she laughed, turning in his arms to face him. Good morning to you, too. Best morning of my life. He kissed her forehead, her nose, the corner of her mouth. You're here in my bed, in my life. I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will be a dream. If it is, we're both having it. She traced the dragon's scales with her fingertip, following the pattern she'd memorized over the past months. When did you get this? 21. Right after I started planning the coup against my father. His hand found hers, stilled her exploration. Every choice I made to become someone you couldn't ignore. This marked it, made it permanent. It suits you. Dangerous and beautiful like you. I'm not dangerous. You're the most dangerous thing in my world. His voice was serious, eyes intense. You have the power to destroy me completely. That's terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. She kissed him then, slow, deep, tasting coffee and promise on his lips. Would have let it escalate again if his phone hadn't buzzed insistently on the nightstand. He groaned, reached for it, glanced at the screen. His expression shifted from relaxed to alert in a heartbeat. What is it? Family meeting. My father's called everyone together for this afternoon. He set the phone down, jaw tight. He's planning something. This is the first formal gathering since the dinner where you met everyone 3 months ago. The dinner that had ended with me standing beside him claiming her right to choose freely. His family had scattered afterward. No resolution, just simmering tension. Should I be worried? No, I won't let anything happen. But concern flickered. In his eyes, though, he should probably go home before it. I don't want you anywhere near if things get ugly. Hyun-woo, please. He cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Let me protect you in this. I need to know you're safe. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist on standing beside him. But the set of his shoulders, the barely concealed fear beneath his calm, it told her this was important, that whatever was coming required his full focus. And worrying about her would split his attention. Dangerously. Okay, she agreed. But you call me after. Immediately after. Promise. The Lee family estate looked exactly as it had 3 months ago. Imposing, cold, built to intimidate. Hyun-woo pulled through the gates in his black sedan, hands steady on the wheel despite the tension coiled in his spine. His mother had texted him an hour ago. Your father is drawing lines. Be prepared. He was always prepared. He had spent 13 years preparing for obstacles, complications, opposition. But walking into that dining room, the same one where Maya had faced his family's judgment, felt different this time because now he had something to lose. Everyone was already seated. His father at the head of the table, expression carved from granite. His uncle and aunt flanking him like lieutenants. His older brother Sungmin looking uncomfortable. His younger sister Jihee watching everything with sharp eyes. And his mother seated at the opposite end from Jin Sang, face carefully neutral. Hyun-woo sit. His father's voice carried absolute authority. He sat, didn't speak, waited. 3 months ago you brought that woman to our table, made claims about your intentions. Jin Sang's fingers droned the mahogany. Precise, methodical. I gave you time to come to your senses. Clearly, there was a mistake. I haven't changed my mind. Then you're a fool. His uncle leaned forward. The age difference alone is scandalous. But her background, her position is irrelevant. Hyun-woo cut him off. Her background is her own. Her position is consultant to 3 of Seoul's top international schools. She's more accomplished than most people in this room. She was hired help. She was an educator. There's a difference. Steel threaded through his words. And you'll speak of her with respect, or we're done here. Son Men shifted uncomfortably. Brother, perhaps we could find a compromise. Someone more appropriate. Mother has suggested several mattress. No. Simple. Final. You're risking everything for an obsession that started in childhood, his father said coldly. I won't allow it to. Destroy what I built. You mean what I built? Hyun-woo leaned back, let his authority settle over the room. I took your crumbling empire and modernized it, made it profitable and significantly less likely to land us all in prison. You don't get to dictate my personal life anymore. Father, that privilege died when you stepped down. I can still make things difficult for you. For her, the threat was explicit, and something in Hyun-woo went very, very cold. If you threaten her again, I will dismantle everything you have left. Your advisory position, your pension, your reputation. I will erase you from this family's history. His voice was soft, lethal. I'd been patient, respectful, but my patience has limits when it comes to her safety. Silence crashed over the table. You would choose her over your family. Jin Sang's face was mottled with rage. Yes, no hesitation. Every single time. She's my family now, too. And unlike you, she's chosen to be here freely. Ji-hee spoke up suddenly. I think it's romantic. All heads turned. She shrugged, defiant. He waited 13 years. That's dedication. Maybe we should respect that instead of trying to control him. You're a child. Our uncle started. I'm 23, same age Hyun-woo was when he took over. And I think father is scared. She looked directly at Jansen. Scared that Hyun-woo found something you never could. Someone who loves him for himself, not his power or money. That must be terrifying for someone who'd never experienced it. The temperature in the room dropped to Arctic, but Yanhwa spoke before Jin Sang could explode. I support my son's decision. Every eye turned to her. I've watched Hyun-woo love Murray for 13 years. Watched him transform himself, drive himself to impossible standards, all for her. That kind of devotion is rare, precious. She stood moved to stand behind Hyun-woo's chair. I won't vote against it, won't stand in his way. He deserves happiness. After everything he sacrificed for this family, you're taking his side. Jin Sang's voice was dangerous. I'm taking the side of my son being happy, something you never prioritized. She placed a hand on Hyun-woo's shoulder. Public affection. She denied him for years out of fear. If you force him to choose between family and love, you'll lose him permanently. Is your pride worth that? Sooning, Men cleared his throat. I agree with Mother. Hyun-woo has earned the right to make his own choices. And honestly, Father, you trying to control him is exactly what drove him to take over in the first place. Haven't we learned anything? The tide was turning. Hyun-woo felt it. The shift in power and loyalty in the fundamental structure of family dynamics. His father felt it too. Fury and something like grief were in his expression. If you do this, Jin Sang said finally, each word precise, you're acknowledging that you'll never be taken seriously by traditional families. That your children, if you have them, will face judgment. That every business deal will come with whispers about your unconventional marriage. I know. Hyun-woo stood, faced his father across the table. And I don't care, because I'd rather have one day of genuine happiness with her than a lifetime of empty respect from people whose opinions don't matter to me. Then you're more foolish than I thought. No, his mother's voice was firm. He's braver than we ever were. Brave enough to choose love over obligation. To risk judgment for genuine connection. We should be proud, not angry. Jin Sung looked around. The table saw his wife's defiance, his daughter's support, his son's agreement, his brother's uncertainty. Saw that he'd already lost this battle. Fine. He bit out the word. Marry her. Destroy your reputation. But don't come crying to me when the consequences arrive. I won't need to. Hyun-woo's voice was calm. Certain I'll have her. That's all the support I need. He left the room without being dismissed, his mother's hand squeezing his shoulder once as he passed. Behind him, he heard his father's rage explode, heard furniture crash, heard the family fracture along new lines. But all he cared about was getting to Mia. She was at her apartment, pacing and drinking chamomile tea that had gone cold, when her door burst open. Hyun-woo stood there breathing hard like he'd run up 7 flights of stairs instead of taking the elevator. His hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and his eyes were incandescent with emotion. "Marry me," he said without preamble. She nearly dropped her mug. "What? Marry me?" "Not someday. Not eventually. Now soon as legally possible." He crossed to her, took the mug, and set it aside, grasped her hands in his. "I've told my entire family that you're my choice, that I'd give up everything for you. Now, meant it, every word. So marry me, Miss Meyer. Make it official. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I meant every promise I made." Hyung-woo, slow down. "I've been slow. 13 years of slow. I'm done being slow." He dropped to his knees right there, in her living room, pulled a ring box from his pocket. Black velvet worn at the edges like he'd been carrying it for a while. Inside a diamond that caught the light and fractured it into rainbows. Simple setting, elegant, perfect. "I bought this 2 years ago," he admitted. "Before I even found you. I bought it on faith that when I did find you, you'd say yes. Was I right? Am I right?" Tears blurred her vision. "This is insane. You keep saying that because it keeps being true. Does that change your answer?" And God, it should absolutely change your answer, because this was too fast, too intense, too much, except it wasn't because he hadn't been fast at all. He'd been patient beyond reason. He'd waited 13 years, transformed himself completely, built an empire, and then offered to walk away from it all for her. That wasn't fast. That was the longest courtship in history. Your family. My mother supports us. My siblings support us. My father will adjust, or he won't. Either way, you're my choice. People will judge. Let them. I'll be too busy making you happy to care. I'm scared." Her voice broke. "Me, too." He stood, still holding the ring, and cupped her face with his free hand, terrified. "But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of anything else. So please, Miss Mia, please say yes." She looked at him, really looked. Saw the man he'd become and the boy he'd been. Saw 13 years of devotion carved into every line of his face. Saw the dragon on his neck that marked his transformation. Saw the hands that could be ruthless in business, but were infinitely gentle with her. Saw her future. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, God help me. Yes." His kiss was desperate, joyful, complete. He slipped the ring onto her finger without breaking contact, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd probably measured her while she slept. The obsessive, devoted, impossible man. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she said, "You know this is going to be complicated. I know people are going to say terrible things. I know your business relationships might suffer. Don't care." Hyun-woo Meyer, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I've done the math on every possible complication, weighed every consequence, calculated every risk, and the answer is always the same. You're worth it. Everything else is just noise." 6 months later, the wedding was small, intimate, nothing like the elaborate affair Seoul society expected from the Lee family heir. They married at sunrise on Namsan Tower, the same place where she'd said yes to giving them a chance. His mother stood as his witness, tears streaming down her face. Mia's best friend from university flew in from Louisiana to stand as hers, looking overwhelmed by Seoul and delighted by the romance of it all. His father didn't attend. Neither did his uncle or several cousins. The absence hurt. Hyun-woo had hoped for reconciliation, but he stood at that altar with Mia's hands in his and felt nothing but gratitude. "I, Lee Hyun-woo, take you, Mia Jean-Baptiste, to be my wife." His voice was steady. "Sure. I promise to love you as I have loved you completely, devotedly, stubbornly. I promise to be gentle with you always. I promise to choose you every single day for the rest of my life." Her vows were simpler. "I, Mia Jean-Baptiste, take you, Lee Hyun-woo, to be my husband. I promise to love you as you deserve, bravely, openly, completely. I promise to trust in us. I promise to see you, the boy you were, the man you've become, and the person you are still becoming. All of you, always. When they kissed, souls spread out beneath them, waking to a new day. 1 year later, Mia sat in the library of their home, not the family mansion, but the house Xion-woo had bought for them in Songbukong, traditional Hanok exterior, modern interior with a library that had floor-to-ceiling windows and housed her growing collection of books in multiple languages. She was grading papers when she heard the front door open, heard his familiar footsteps approaching. "Honey, I'm home," he called in English, the phrase that had become their private joke. "In the library," she called back. He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie, and even after a year of marriage, her heart still kicked at the sight of him. The dragon on his neck was partially hidden by his collar, but she could see the edge of it, could trace it from memory. "How was the meeting?" she asked. "Long, tedious, made me miss you." He crossed to her, kissed the top of her head, then settled onto the window seat, the same spot she'd occupied 13 years ago in a different library. "How were the students?" "Brilliant, frustrating, exactly as they should be." She set aside her work, moved to join him. "Your mother called. Wants us for dinner this weekend. Just her or the whole family. She said your father might attend." Hyun-woo was quiet for a moment. His relationship with Jin Sang had thawed slightly, not forgiveness exactly, but a cold détente. They saw each other at family gatherings, exchanged polite words, maintained appearances. It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't warfare either. "We'll go," he decided. "If you're comfortable with it." "Always asking what I'm comfortable with." She smiled, cupid his face. "I'm comfortable with anything as long as you're beside me." "Good, because I have news." "Oh, the literacy foundation we started, the one providing free tutoring to underprivileged kids." His eyes lit up the way they always did when he talked about their joint projects. "We've been approved for government funding. We can expand to 3 more districts." She launched herself at him, nearly knocking them both off the window seat. "Hyun-woo, that's incredible." He laughed, catching her, holding her close. "You're incredible. This was your vision. I just provided the infrastructure. We're a good team, the best team." He kissed her temple, her cheek, found her mouth. "Though, I do have one concern." "What?" "If we expand the foundation, you'll be even busier. When will we have time for the other project we discussed?" She pulled back, studied his face. "What other project?" "The one where we fill this house with tiny humans who have your brains and my stubborn determination." His hand drifted to her stomach, rested there gently. That project heat flooded her. They talked about children carefully, aware of the complications, the judgments that would come. But talking was different from actively trying. "Are you asking or suggesting?" "I'm hoping." His voice went soft, vulnerable. "I'm hoping that maybe we could start trying. That you're ready. That we're ready." She thought about it. About tiny versions of him, of them running through this house. About teaching her own children the way she'd once taught him. About the family they could build together, unconventional, judged, but full of love. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's make terrible, beautiful, stubborn children who will drive us both crazy." His smile could have powered the city. "I love you, Miss Meyer." "Mrs. Lee," she corrected, still getting used to the name. "And I love you too, even though you're impossible. Because I'm impossible. I'll admit it, fine. Because you're impossible." She kissed him deep and slow and full of promise. "My impossible, devoted, perfect for me husband." Epilogue. 5 years later. The little girl had her mother's caramel skin and her father's intense eyes. She sat in the library window seat, the same one that had witnessed so much history, with a book open in her lap. 5 years old and already reading at a 2nd grade level, much to everyone's amazement. "What are you reading, Hannah?" Hyun-woo asked, settling beside his daughter. "The Tale of the Nine-Tailed Fox." She turned the page carefully. "But I don't understand this word." "Which one?" He pointed. "Devotion." Hyun-woo glanced up, caught Mia's eye from across the room where she sat with their 2-year-old son, Mei-jeon, who was determined to eat his board book rather than read it. She smiled, that particular smile that was just for him. Devotion, he repeated, looking back at Hannah. It means loving someone so completely that you'd do anything for them, that you'd wait for them, work for them, become better for them. Like in fairy tales, better than fairy tales. Like in real life, did you devote yourself to Mama? I did for a very long time before she agreed to marry me. Hannah considered this, seriously. Why? Because she was worth it. Because some people are worth any amount of waiting, any amount of effort. They're worth becoming your best self for. Will I find someone to devote myself to? Maya spoke up from across the room. Maybe. Or maybe you'll devote yourself to something else, a passion, a purpose, a dream. Devotion isn't just romantic, sweetie. It's about committing your whole heart to something that matters. What do you devote yourself to, Mama? Your two monsters, mainly. She grinned at Majin, who had successfully gotten Bukagi and looked pleased with himself and education. And your impossibly romantic father, who still brings me honey cookies every Tuesday. Hyun-woo stood cross to his wife, lifted Majin from her lap, and settled the sticky toddler on his hip. With his free hand, he pulled Maya to her feet, wrapped her in an embrace that had become as natural as breathing. Happy? He murmured against her hair impossibly. She tilted her face up, kissed him softly. You, every single day. He glanced at Hannah, who was watching them with that too observant gaze she'd inherited from both parents. Then at Min-jin, who was trying to grab the dragon tattoo on his neck with chubby, damp fingers every single day. From the window seat, Hannah returned to her book, but she'd learned something important today. Something she'd carry with her, always. Devotion was real. Love was worth waiting for, and sometimes the best fairy tales were the ones that started with Miss Myra and ended with happily ever after. The city lights of Seoul twinkled outside, witness to a love story that had survived 13 years, countless obstacles, and every reason to fail. But it hadn't failed, because some loves, the real ones, the devoted ones, the ones that transform people and build families and rewrite destinies, those loves were built to last, and this one would last forever. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who loves a good romance. Drop a comment and let me know. Do you believe in waiting for the one? Have you ever experienced a love that felt like destiny? I read every comment, and I love hearing your stories. Until next time, keep believing in love, keep believing in devotion, and remember, some things are worth waiting 13 years for. See you in the next.